sinners, and saints. Dust off those horns and halos. It's time for Alan After Dark.
I really thought that I wanted to be a journalist, and I geared my studies initially toward that goal. Luckily, I changed my mind as I was in college and went into a field that was more stable and secure. But the core of me that wanted to be a journalist stems from my innate curiosity. I just want to know things. I'm fascinated by lots of different things, but especially the dark side of life. When I started going out to the gay clubs, I really was naive. And if you go back to some of the first episodes of this podcast, I kind of explain my thinking at the time. You know, that I would find someone, they would become my best friend, we would become lovers and then married, and I would live happily ever after. Of course, that's not what happened, but that was my naivety. My first time, I think, coming into contact with a hustler, I was totally not even aware of it until what happened actually happened. There was a guy at the club that night, and I was feeling pretty good. I'd had a couple of drinks, or 3 or 4, and I remember having to go to the men's room to pee. And as I was coming out, this guy was standing there, and he was sort of gruff, you know, sort of like the country type, a 5 o'clock shadow. He had a flannel shirt on, a t-shirt on underneath, blue jeans. I don't remember if he had boots on. I doubt that he did. But he kind of fit that image of, well, a country boy, a cowboy, but he looked a little bit older and he looked really sexy. Well, I offered him a smile, and before I knew it, we were making out, and I was really excited about it. So he said, "Where's your car?" Well, I'm like, "Well, it's in the parking lot, the lower parking lot." And so we go out there and we're making out, and he's unzipping my jeans and working them down, and I'm helping push them down. And he's going down on me, and I am really getting there. But for some reason, a little voice in my head told me to reach down to my jeans. And I felt back on the back side of my jeans, and I realized that my wallet was missing. My motion made him stop, and he looked up at me and was like, "What?" And the light coming into the car, I just happened to notice over on the passenger side in the floorboard, there was my wallet. And I just looked at him as I reached between his legs and take my wallet. And I just said, "Did you take this out of my pocket?" And he was like, "What? You think I would do that?" And I was like, "Well, how else could it have gotten way over there? If it had just fallen out, it would have been on my side." And he acted all mad and everything. And I said, "Just get the fuck out of my car." He said something to the effect, "Well, what? I don't get anything for this? I need some money." I'm like, "What?" Anyway, I think I threw him $5 and he got out, and basically I left. I was so angry and a little bit embarrassed. But as I was driving home, the incident began to fascinate me. And as I was talking to a friend a few days later about what happened, he goes, "Oh, that's that hustler. Yeah, he's really hot, but he's nothing but trouble. And he won't necessarily ask you for money. He just tries to take it." And I said, "He's a hustler?" And he goes, "Yeah, he is. He'll offer you sex for money." So I was like, okay, so it's the same thing technically as prostitution. Now, you all know I have no qualms about that. If that's what you choose to do and you're doing it of your own free will, knock yourself out. Whether it's 9 to 5 or shaking that ass, bitches, get that cash. But the incident really did intrigue me. So I became very much fascinated with the hustling lifestyle. So in my own curiosity, not that I was going to write a story about it or anything, I just wanted to know. I was just very curious about these guys that were hustling, what were the reasons for hustling, and what were their lives like. Now, I've told you about the one. I usually call him Will, and how even at the age he is now, he's still hustling. He's just got this guy that he's with, not so much brainwashed, but convinced to keep him around. even though the last time I run into them, Will was all over me right in front of the guy. But anyway, after that incident, when I'd be at the bar and I wasn't looking for dick, I would start observing. I've always been a people watcher, and I started picking up on these signs of guys that I suspected were hustling. And I really just wanted to talk to them and get a feel for their lives, but I knew that they really weren't interested in that. They were trying to make a buck, and I get that. One night, I was at the other bar that we had. We had two big clubs, and we had several other bars that were not like dance clubs. I was at the biggest dance club one night, and this guy, he was attractive. He was very sexy. He was acting a little high-strung, but something told me to go and approach him, and I did. And we started chatting, and he just all of a sudden said, "You got $20?" Now, even though I'm a naive country boy, I know better than to give someone money that just out of the blue asks me for it, because usually it's for something not on the up and up. Well, fortunately, I didn't have the money anyway. So I just told him, "I'm sorry, I don't have any cash on me." He goes, "Oh, well, dang." And we continued to chat. Finally, I guess he just got bored or whatever. At least that was my impression. And he drifted off. And I thought, well, so much for that. And I started hanging with my friends and flirting and stuff. But apparently I made some sort of impression with this guy. And he, all of a sudden, about an hour and a half later, I'm at the bar, and all of a sudden he's standing right beside me. Oh, I didn't describe him, did I? Kind of slim, a little rough around the edges, a little bit of a 5 o'clock shadow, baseball cap, t-shirt, raggedy jeans. Anyway, all of a sudden he was right beside me there at the bar, and he started really flirting very heavily. Basically, well, he grabbed my dick, and I'm responsive to that. I thought he was cute in that dark, sinister kind of way, and very much was receptive to his advances. Well, he finally just said, "Can we go back to your place?" And I said yes. For some reason, my stupid brain wasn't remembering that just a few hours back, he had asked for $20. Anyway, so we get to my car, and he says, "I need to make a stop before we go to your place. Would you mind driving me?" And my little inner voice is screaming at me, "Don't do this. Tell him to get out of your car right now." But my curiosity, the kind that kills the cat, that said, "Let's see where this is going." So I said, "Sure." So we're driving, and he's giving me directions. And oh my God, I quickly realized that we were in the projects, and I was like, what in the fuck have I got myself into? He said, "Pull into the front of this house, leave the car running. I'll be back in a minute." I've pulled in. I do turn off the lights. He gets out of the car, and he's heading toward the front porch of this house. It was only then that in the shadows, I saw somebody move. As I'm sitting there with the car running, this person starts following him down toward my car, and him saying, "Get in on this side in the back seat." I'm like, what is going on here? And he says, "Don't worry about it. She's going to take us to where I need to go." I'm like, what is this? My inner voice was screaming, "This is a damn drug deal. He's buying drugs." Anyway, she said, "We're going up to the top of this hill, and I can get you some." I'm like, okay. And she's like, to the guy that I thought I was going to hook up with, she's like, "Why did you get this poor boy involved in this? You're going to get his ass killed down here." I'm like, "What?" She goes, "Don't worry. Just get up here, and we'll get out, and we'll make the purchase." And I was like, okay. And so I was trying to play it as calmly as I could. We get up to the corner, and they both get out. And I wait until they get closer to this corner of the building that they're at, and I just take off. And I never look back. Unfortunately for me, I didn't really know exactly how to get out of this place. I knew that I was in trouble, that I could get myself killed just by taking a wrong turn. Can you imagine how I was feeling? My heart was thumping through my chest, and I was in panic mode because I also know that the police monitor those areas to see what kind of traffic is going through. But for some reason, some miracle, I took the correct turns, and within just a couple of minutes, I was on a street that I recognized. Because of this experience, my first assumption, while not exactly totally correct, wasn't completely incorrect either. But I just made the assumption that most hustlers were hustling because they were trying to get enough money to cover their addiction. But I was still wondering, well, are they all gay? If you were a straight guy who had an insatiable addiction and needed lots of money to cover it, would you be willing to cross that line and be with a guy for the money in order to get your fix? The movie Basketball Diaries comes to mind. You know, the character that Leonardo DiCaprio played, where he would let old guys blow him in a bathroom for money. And I really was obsessed with trying to work out absolutes when it come to hustlers, even though I should know, and I do know now, that there's no such thing as an absolute in any subject, any type of behavior, any type of incident. There's always going to be wild cards, different parameters for different people. But I also, as I came along through the clubs, becoming more street smart, I also knew that there were people who would come into the clubs, regardless if they were a gay club, a straight club, or whatever, that were there preying on people, trying to pickpocket them, trying to get money, not always offering a service in exchange for cash. As you start developing those streetwise skills, you do become more cynical of pretty much everybody, thinking that almost everybody has some sort of angle, not just the hope that they want to get their rocks off, but they might have an ulterior motive, from being paid cash to possibly hurting you or even killing you. It made me become more aware of who was working in the bars and how people behaved. You know, not everybody will just go walking up to a stranger and start talking to them. Usually, back in those days, there was a look across the room, maybe acknowledging them while you're dancing, giving them the eye, a smile or something. Maybe even buying that person a drink and having the person delivering the drink tell them it was from you and see if they acknowledge you for the drink. When somebody came straight to you, I always was very suspicious about people. But I got to thinking about the bartenders and how they behaved. Could I recognize when one was straight versus one that was gay or bisexual? I believe that's what led me to my obsession with bartenders and wanting to fool around with all of them. I never really at first made a connection to hustling and bartenders, but then again, if we want to be honest, whether you're working a 9-to-5 job or whatever, in a way, you're a hustler, right? You're doing a service for a paycheck, but mostly we're not getting paid with nature's credit card, now are we? I remember one night leaving the club. I was kind of just frustrated. It was just not fun that night for me, even though it was a really busy crowd. I was just kind of over it. And I decided to head home. And I go down to the car, get in, and I start circling around to go to the exit. And I look over, and there's this pickup truck there. And one of the hottest guys that I recognized from the club was there, and he seemed to be moving stuff from the cab of the truck and putting it in the bag. And I just took a chance, and I came to a stop behind his truck, and I rolled down the window, and I was like, "Hey, everything okay? You're not having truck problems, are you?" He goes, "Nah, the old lady's looking for some pussy tonight, and so I'm just kind of making room in the truck for a third person to sit in case we have to take somebody home with us." I'm like, "Oh, so you're married?" And he was like, "Well, not exactly. We just kind of live together and share the bills and stuff. And we do have a daughter, but we're really not together. We're just trying to make do." I'm like, "Oh, well, how unlucky for her, because you're really, really hot." And he just grinned from ear to ear. And let me just give you his description. He had a buzz cut, that was pretty close to almost having a shaved head. Beautiful swimmer's body, very muscular, athletic. These dark eyebrows that just kind of set off his chiseled in stone face. He was very hot. Okay? He was very hot. I can't think of anybody who would turn him down if he made the offer. So he just come over and he leaned into the window there that I had rolled down, and we just started chatting about stuff. And I was just kind of asking him, I'm like, well, how does that really work for you? I would think that could be really uncomfortable. You know, your sort of ex that you live with is picking up girls. And he just said, well, I don't really mind. Sex is sex. And if you get off, you get off. And all of a sudden, he just opened the door and sit down in the car with me. And he rolled up the window and said, can you turn on the air conditioning? It's really hot out there and I'm burning up. And I'm like, okay, sure. And we just kept chatting so that I pulled back into a parking space that was a little bit more discreet and more in the dark, not so much light, because I sensed an opportunity to get my mouth on one of the hottest guys that I had seen in a long time. I think I said earlier, I had seen him in the bar quite a few times, but I never saw him with anybody. And he seemed to be standoffish, but damn, was he hot. Well, in the conversation that happened from that point on, I really can't tell you a lot of it, but I knew that I was able to work the conversation in a way that made him more comfortable. And before I knew it, suddenly he took off his shirt and he said, I am still burning up. You don't mind if I take my shirt off? Well, he already had it off, so I was just like, no, I don't mind at all. If you want, you can take your pants off. And he just chuckled, and all of a sudden, he reached down and unzipped the jeans and whipped it out. And I was just like, holy fuck, damn, hell yeah. He said, well, that feels a little bit better. I'm like, good. And I didn't even hesitate, and I went down on him right there and had a damn good time. I drove back around after we were finished and let him off at his truck, and he said, hey, that was kind of fun. Maybe we can do it again sometime. I'm like, yeah, great. And so I left. And I just thought I'd lucked out. He was kind of pissed that his ex was going to eat some pussy and he wanted to get some dick for spite. Or he wanted a queer to get him off. Well, anyway, that was the last time I'd seen him for a while. And I just kind of let that be a great memory. But then one night I was at a different club. And there he was. And so I didn't really hesitate. I came up and sat down at the bar right beside him, talking to a guy to the other side of him as if I didn't really notice him until he acknowledged me. And he was very nice. He said, hey, how are you doing? And I'm like, good, I'm good. And I was like, how are you doing? He goes, well, to be honest, I'm really struggling. We're heading toward my daughter's birthday and I really don't have any money. I'm like, you don't? He goes, yeah, it's been tough getting a job and the ex is pressing me for child support and she's not living there. She's shacked up with some woman and I really don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, for a minute, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, you're drinking here, so you're spending money, even though that's a judgment. I really don't judge on that because you don't know what people are going through. And I've spent many a night drinking my sorrows away when I should have been saving that money. So living in a glass house, I can't throw stones. But anyway, he did a little test. He said, I need to go to the bathroom. Can you watch my drink? And I'm like, sure, I'll watch it. And I did. And he come back and we continued chatting back and forth. He would wander off somewhere and he would always come back with a fresh drink and everything. I don't know. I was getting drunk and he just leaned over and he said, I'm going to the bathroom. And I'm like, okay. Well, I noticed that his drink was empty. Okay, so he didn't ask me to watch his drink. And I thought, well, that was an invitation. I gulped mine down and I followed him. This club had a men's room and a unisex bathroom. And he seemed to be standing there and he saw me approaching and I watched him go in to the unisex bathroom and I looked around and I just kind of walked in too. He just acted funny for a second. He's like, you know, I can't really do anything. I'm really straight. I really am. But, you know, it was kind of fun that night what we did. So you want to watch me piss? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'll watch you. And I did. He whipped it out and he pissed. And he's still talking to me about his daughter and how frustrated he was. And as he finished pissing, his dick was still out. I couldn't help but notice that it was getting hard, but he kept saying that he didn't know what he was going to do for his daughter's birthday. I knew what his angle was. He does have a daughter. I knew that was true. So I thought I just happened to have a 20 in my front pocket, and I slid it into his pocket and said, here's some money for her birthday. Get her something kind of nice, even though 20 bucks wouldn't buy a whole lot. And as I put the money in his pocket, his dick was still out. So my left hand, I just wrapped around the shaft of his dick, and he proceeded to allow me. He was very nice that whole evening. But we didn't really get to complete the deed that night. And then when we left the restroom, you had to kind of not be in there long because somebody would complain and here they'd come and you'd get bounced out. And it would be a big old thing of gossip. But I wouldn't have cared. He was hot as fuck. Oh, let's just call him James. That's the name we'll use in this case. I don't know that I mentioned a name before, but let's just call him James. Yeah. So anyway, that seemed to be the end of that night, and I realized that he was kind of hustling, but I do believe somewhat that he really was trying to get some money for his daughter's birthday. He could have been lying, but you know what? Only the orange turd would lie about his own children. Most people don't do that, and even a hustler won't go to certain levels of deceit for a buck. If he had been a drug addict, yeah. But James wasn't. James was just this hot stud who was just amazing to look at. Let's fast forward to about 6 or 7 years later. I was working at the gay bar as a server. On occasion, the owner, my boss, he would bring in male strippers. And they were always local people, and there were sometimes guys that the owner's husband wanted to hook up with. But you would never know who they were going to be usually. You know, there was one that was always there, and he was a bit of a scuzz bucket, just kind of sleazy and nasty that certain guys like. I didn't, and yes, I'm being a judge there. But one night when I come in, and I didn't know who the strippers were going to be, lo and behold, it was James up there in really tight Speedo-like boxer briefs, and he was shaking his thing, and he was still as hot as ever. But this time, he didn't give me the time of day. He didn't acknowledge me at all. He did recognize me when he saw me, but I guess I represented something from his past that he didn't want to remember. But you know, of course, me being the person that I am, I wasn't going to let that go. So, you know, I took $5 out of my tips and I went up and I tipped him right into his briefs. And he just said, thank you. And that was the last time I ever saw him. I wonder what he's doing. I wonder if he managed to get custody of his daughter. I wonder if any of that would have fallen out into his favor. My guess is no, because all the mother would have to say is that he's a queer, and mostly he would be probably even not allowed to visit his child. But James, if you're out there listening to this podcast and you're still living around here, you know who you are. I know you do, based on my description and what happened. You know where I'm going to be hanging out. Give me a look and we'll play around again. But throughout those years, I had other experiences with hustlers that never really provided me with anything more than what I suspected. You know, there would be homeless guys hanging out at the club near downtown, and they would holler out at you, hey, I'll show you my dick for $10 and things like that. And a lot of them were probably straight. They just knew that they possibly could manipulate some guys into giving them some money just to flash their wiener. And there were others. There were a couple of bouncers at the bars that I've talked about before who bragged about being studs, but they did that thinking that that made them more attractive to guys. And they would mooch, for the lack of a better word, off of you. You'd wind up taking them to dinner or hanging out and buying a round or two or three of drinks. And I always knew that in a way I was being played. But then again, there was a guy that I dated that absolutely was a hustler, even though he acted like he was as pure and sweet as a gentle snow. It only took about, I don't know, a month to figure out the snow had a few tire tracks in it. So after saying all this and telling you these amazing stories, I really have no other conclusion other than hustlers do it for whatever reason they do it. Some of them are doing it for a drug fix. Others are doing it just for the cash to make a living. And I know that some of them actually enjoy the process. There's a kink about that. And imagine if you are a hustler and guys are paying you and all you have to do is lay there and let a guy blow you. You're getting an orgasm and cash. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? Thank you for sticking it out through this entire episode of Alan After Dark. I hope you've had fun and have been entertained. Remember, take life by the balls and be real. We'll see you soon.
Ah.